Hey, what's up, you guys? I'm Jaquan,
I'm Jasmine.
and welcome to the Film Spill.
So today, guys, we're going to be reviewing Vikings Valhalla. This is a drama series, and here is the summary. In this sequel to Vikings, 100 years have passed and a new generation of legendary heroes arises to forge its own destiny and make history.
The rate I'm going to give this show is going to be a 4. Let's get into my pros and my cons. So, very first pro, like I stated, I really love Viking shows. Any show is about history, I'm going to definitely check it out. And then you start adding war in the midst, right up my alley. Like she stated, I love how this series was a continuation of the original Viking, which that show was epic. Harold was definitely, he's somebody that went really hard. And I just like how a lot of these characters were real life characters in history. So it wasn't just fictional people that they were using in this series for the most part. Godwin was definitely dope, but at times, he could be a rat, but he was somebody who was like trying to preserve himself, I guess you can say. When Canute captured London, defeating Edmund in the first series, that was really, really crazy. The Battle of Kattegat was definitely dope. Freys killing Care, Forkbeard defeating Olaf and Kattegat, Godwin marrying Geetha. That, like I said, he was very, very calculated on how he was, he was able to get with Geetha, who was the niece of Canute. So now he basically kind of had a right, kingship, close to his heirs being kings. Harker dying was definitely great because he was just what he was doing with Freys. Freys killing Olaf. Finding out Eleanor was married to the Emperor of Constantinople, that was definitely a plot twist. Freys and her people stealing Magnus's ship to be able to escape. Harold and Leif saving Freys. I like how Leif found the Golden Lands, which we found out happens to be like the West Indies, or some people state America, but like I said, these were people that were actually real in history. I like how Harold threw his nephew Magnus in the sail. Magnus was the son of Olaf, and he was basically trying to avenge his dad, but he was crazy. Cons, Olaf was definitely an op. Emma falling in love with Canute was definitely crazy to me because here's Canute, capturing England and destroying, her family, her husband, and she basically, marries this guy and have kids with him. I get, she got to kind of get in where she fit in, but that was just wild to me because she actually fell in love with him. The seer was definitely ugly. He's somebody who actually comes from Vikings, the original series, but just the fact that, he has no eyes and, he's bald and he's like deformed looking, you have to lick his hand in order for him to be able to see visions and, for him to know who he's talking to. That was just crazy. Olaf killing Liv was definitely sad. Emma killing Elfrin was definitely crazy, and basically she did it on accident. She was torturing the girl and ended up killing her. That was definitely sad. Freys having her baby in prison was definitely sad. Like I said, Harker was definitely an op. Canute dying was definitely a crazy turning point. Magnus poisoning the people of Jomsburg, and Eric the Red, which was Freys and Leif's father. He was just crazy. Overall, definitely give this show a 4. Recommended. You guys should check it out.
Okay, guys, so I give this show a 3 out of 5, and I'm just going to talk about 3 of the characters. Watching a show about Leif Erikson was so interesting because I've only heard about him through SpongeBob.
And SpongeBob, Leif Erikson Day, for real, yeah. Me too. That's the first time I heard that.
That was really funny. He was very loyal to his sister Freydis. It was interesting how he didn't want to be anything like his father, who was like a very violent person. But after his woman dies, it triggered him to have like all these violent outbursts, forcing him to realize that he does have a darker side and accept that that's a part of him. And I think this just goes along with the saying of we try not to be like our parents so bad, just to grow up and realize we're so much like them. But he was like a solid character. Godwin was a master manipulator. He did whatever he could to ensure his survival and influence within the royal family. He stopped at nothing to achieve his goals. One example was when he had his girlfriend killed so that he can marry another woman so his future children would be of royal lineage. He was just really cutthroat. Harold's character, he developed from like a revenge-driven warrior into a legendary ruler. He went through a lot of loss. He was imprisoned, banished, tortured. All of those things just kind of hardened him. And then he later learned to develop his political skills. And at the end, he ultimately claimed the Norwegian throne. I don't usually care for like history or old-timey shows, but this was a pretty solid show, and I give it a 3.
Yeah, just like always, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment. You guys have a good one.